Mellow greetings, everybody. My name is James. I am from the internet, and today we are going to be going back to our reoccurring weekly segment entitled, So What's Going On in Post-Racial America? So if you happen to be new to my channel or my content, this is where every single week I go into Google, I merely type the word racist or racism, and I see how many news stories come up from the last week. Then I put them all up on a board and I run through them really fast so that this way everybody can get to see a wide snapshot of all the different types and styles of racism that still occur here in the United States of America on a daily basis. Now, my hope here is that if I do this enough times, people will stop repeating the horrible trope that we live in a post-racial society when, in fact, our very country is rooted in and established upon a firm layer of white supremacy. So, rather than giving you my opinions, let's run through shit that's actually going on, and I will let you decide for yourself if we are indeed living in a post-racial United States of America. Here we go. Racism in schools. Students at local high school post racially insensitive pictures. What? No way. This is from WKRC in Ohio. A disturbing trend is showing up again in our schools, the so-called George Floyd Challenge, where people pose with a knee on someone else's neck, mocking Floyd's murder. Claremont Northeastern High School is the latest place this has reared its ugly head. It happened there last Wednesday with two posts to social media, one with the student's knee on another person's neck, and a second post, this one a girl, wearing a White Lives Matter mask. The principal acted swiftly and decisively. Quote, one of our students had his knee on the back of somebody else's neck, and it's offensive, it's appalling, and there's no place for that in any school, let alone here. We do not go into specifics about discipline, but I can tell you, I gave them the severest consequences that I could give. I somehow have a feeling that my idea of the severest consequences and the principal's idea of severest consequences probably miles apart, but I digress. Let's continue so I can keep hearing about what's going on in this beautiful high school located smack dab in the middle of post-racial America. About 400 students attend school at Claremont Northeastern, nearly all of them white. In fact, there is only one fully African-American student in the entire school. Now, I'm not even going to go into this shitty fucking trope of there's only one fully African-American student in school, because frankly, that's not the way racism works. Nobody's checking your genetics. If you are black seeming, if you are black passing, if you are mixed but appear black, guess what? Society treats you as black, and thus racism ensues. So can we please stop parsing out the black people and determining what level of blackness they have while we're discussing racism in schools where ignorant people say and do ignorant shit? Yeah, that would be great. Tri-City's parent outraged after daughter is called a slave at school. This is from Pasco, Washington. The school district is hiring a third party to examine the district's policies and talk with students, staff, and parents about concerns with bias and discrimination. This comes after a student told LaShira Weathers' daughter, "When do slaves get to say no?" after she refused to move in class. Because again, children just magically come out of the womb, recognize that somebody else is a different color than them, and then immediately start insisting that they shouldn't have a say or talk back because, you know, they're still slaves. Yeah, that just happens organically, right? Her daughter, a senior, is still upset and embarrassed, first over the incident itself, and second after her concerns were seemingly disregarded by school administrators, said her mother, who is especially unsettled that her daughter remains in the same class with the boy. You know, the one who called her a slave in the middle of class, who is apparently still in class, still sitting right next to her, giving her the slave owner side eye. A classmate heard the conversation and reported it to administrators. While school officials talked with both teens, the boy wasn't punished. He just had to apologize. However, she later heard he returned to class and told the student who reported it that he didn't face any consequences at all. Why? Because he doesn't consider the apology a consequence, because whatever apology he gave wasn't heartfelt. It was because he had to. And this goes back to what I said in the beginning. While racism will be passed down from person to person and generation to generation in families across the United States of America, and that we as people can defeat that by surrounding racist people with non-racist ideas, since this is learned behavior, white supremacy itself, however, is systemic, and it is the larger issue. And it is these white supremacist institutions that do things like letting a white student off with a slap on the wrist after he looks at a black student, calls her a slave, and then gets to sit next to her for the remainder of the year, lording his whiteness over her. This is systemic, and this is the sort of thing that makes passing racism down from generation to generation seemingly acceptable. Oh, by the way, in case you thought these were isolated incidences, of course I have more. Connecticut student arrested in connection to racist Snapchat post. A black teenager in Fairfield, Connecticut was the target of a racist Snapchat post allegedly made by a classmate earlier this month, according to the teen's mother and the Fairfield Police Department. 16-year-old Jamar Meador was sitting in his homeroom on May 7th when a classmate who is white allegedly took a Snapchat picture of Meador from behind, circling him and writing, "Why is there an N-word in my homeroom?" along with another line that said, "Why is he not in chains?" Now, what do all three of these stories have in common? It's quite easy, really. This is racism standing up on its tippy toes, waving at you, trying to get your attention, trying to let you know that it is hard at work, passing itself down from one generation onto the next generation, letting you know that this newest wave of brand new, squeaky clean young racists are ready to go into battle and take up the mantle that their parents and their parents before them so bravely carried into majority white high schools and school districts around the country. Well played, racist parents. Thanks for passing that down the line, so we have to deal with this crap for at least another 15 years while we deprogram your kids from all the shitty racist crap you taught them. Next! State representative targeted racist threat online. A self-described white nationalist group made up threatening statements about Representative Manny Espita after he spoke up about racism. This comes to us from Nashua, New Hampshire. Quote, completely offensive language and dangerous language, to be honest. Pictures were posted of graffiti found on the rail trail in Nashua with the messages, "Keep New England White," "Defend New England," and "Death to Israel." Espita posted the graffiti on Twitter and said the group behind it is NSC 131. Quote, "I wanted to make sure folks know that there are people perpetrating acts of white supremacy right down the street here in Nashua." Espita provided local news with a screenshot from the group's account on the platform Telegram. Quote, "Anyone with a name like Manny Espita, state rep or not, has no moral right to throw shade at any true white nationalist New Hampshireite. You have no right to be here. You're an occupier here, and the days of these types trampling on New England are coming to an end." NSC 131 posted. Hey, remember just before when I told you that racism in its simplest form gets passed down from generation to generation and children would just absorb what they are taught and what they see around them? Well, guess what? Those kids who get injected with that mild intergenerational racism, yeah, these are the kind of threatening white supremacist shitbags they turn into if left unchecked. But yeah, that's right. Don't worry. The rest of us will pick up the slack and we will properly educate your fucking children, since you couldn't be bothered to not pass along your shitty intergenerational racism on down to them. Thanks a lot. Next! What's a judge's moral standard? Allegations of racism and sexism spotlight judicial misconduct. Probate judge Randy Jinks has mostly denied the allegations by employees. The case spotlights how Alabama handles ethics complaints against judges. Really? Mostly denied racist and sexist allegations? Mostly? The bar is low. According to the Judicial Inquiry Commission's complaint, which identifies employees only by their initials, Jinks' quote, grossly inappropriate demeanor didn't begin immediately. Instead, it ramped up about 6 months into his judgeship. The employees say he would mouth a racial slur on occasions to his deputy chief clerk when he was referring to a black person. One time, after a black couple had been in the office to fill out a marriage certificate, he said, quote, "What did their black asses want?" An employee recalled, according to the complaint. He is also accused of having spoken disparagingly about the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests that erupted across the country after Floyd was killed in police custody. Employees say he commented, quote, "I don't see anything wrong with the police killing him," and that, quote, "he pretty much got what he deserved." Fun side note, when you don't confront racists and take their face and rub it into their racism, well, their racism grows unchecked, and their concern with others hearing or seeing their racism essentially dwindles away to the point where being fully open, vocally racist becomes the standard norm, because people and institutions do not properly hold people like this to task, thus making the situation worse. Next! CNN drops Rick Santorum over racist comments. What? No, shut the front door. A senior CNN executive told the Huffington Post on Saturday that the network parted ways with Santorum, a political commentator, earlier this week, even as the former Pennsylvania senator tried to explain his comments that, quote, "there was nothing in the U.S. before the arrival of European colonizers." Santorum went on Cuomo Primetime to explain that he misspoke in a speech to conservative youth group in April. No, he didn't misspeak. He knew exactly who his target audience was. A bunch of young, white, conservative males. People that he could be openly racist towards and in front of because they would get it, because they were of his ilk. Why? Because racists can identify other racists. Racists sit comfortably in institutions of white supremacy and gather other racists around them and normalize racism so that other people who don't say and do racist shit will think it's just okay and it's part of the everyday vernacular. And hey, this is just what we do. We just call people N-words. It's cool. Don't worry about it. Next! Charleston church shooter making appellate arguments. The man on federal death row for the racist slayings of 9 members of a Black South Carolina congregation is making his appellate argument that his conviction and death sentence should be overturned. I wonder what possible reason he could be listing in his appeal. U.S. District Judge Richard Gergel held 2 competency hearings for Roof, one before the start of his trial and one before its sentencing phase, to determine if Roof could act as his own attorney for that portion of the trial. His appellate team wrote that the court errantly found Roof competent, despite the fact that, quote, "every defense expert agreed Roof suffered a delusional belief that he would be rescued by the victors of a race war, which prevented him from understanding the threat of execution was real." Yeah, if you think white people thinking other white people are going to save them from the repercussions of doing racist shit, and you think that is somehow mentally deficient, I hate to tell you something here, buddy, but that makes about 90% of white people in the United States of America mentally deficient, okay? Representing himself for sentencing, Roof successfully prevented jurors from hearing mitigating evidence about his mental health, under the delusion, his attorneys wrote, that he would be rescued from prison by white nationalists, but only bizarrely if he kept his mental impairments out of the public record. Yeah, that isn't a bizarre thought at all. The Nazis were well known for taking people with mental illnesses and rustling them all together with Jews and gypsies and anybody else they determined was a Bolshevik or a hard liberal. They put them all in the same trains and sent them to the same camp. Because guess what? Mentally deficient white people in a white ethno state, yeah, they get pulled out of the general populace too, because, you know, it would weaken the brand. So let's not make it sound like Dylan Roof believing that white nationalists will do what white nationalists will do, and what they've been doing for over a fucking century now is somehow bizarre or odd or makes him incapable to stand trial because he's somehow mentally deficient. He's not mentally deficient. He's on point. Next. Lansing police officer fired for sending racist messages to coworkers. But don't worry, because when cops get caught doing something shitty and they get forced to resign or fired, they just become a cop somewhere else, a county away, a town over. You know, an hour drive to the next city. It doesn't matter. This isn't getting racism out of the system. This is just getting racism out of your specific local system. This racist shitbag will still be on a racist shitbag police force somewhere soon saying racist shitbag shit. Don't worry about it. Next! Former St. Louis cop wants separate trial after co-defendant's racist texts emerge. Funny here. 2 white cops got arrested for beating a protester. Only the protester was a black undercover cop himself. Yes, cop plus cop beating cop, and now all the cops want separate trials because they think it makes them look less racist than the racist cop they were partnered with. Next! And of course, we've talked about this one before. Yet another state, this time Texas, passes a bill banning critical race theory requirement. Why? Because white supremacist institutions do not want history taught with equality. They want history to be written and taught by the victors. This is why in Texas, they still have textbooks that call slaves foreign workers. And I promise you, this is not the last you've heard of this story or other stories similar to it, because every state that is passing these bills now is running immediately into state Supreme Court appeals. So stay tuned. I'll let you know just how much more racist these white supremacist institutions get over the coming months. So if you take nothing away from this week's edition of What's Going On in Post-Racial America, take away this. The old guard is slowly passing away into the nether void, but they have left behind children and grandchildren and an entire history of racism that all of those families are happily passing downhill to the next generation. And all these kids are in school doing racist ass shit. So please have the uncomfortable conversations, because if you don't, you are leaving the future of this country to the very white nationalist institutions, which will teach these kids and will take their young minds that are already filled with intergenerational racism and sharpen them to a fine point. And I don't want to deal with these people 10 and 20 years down the road. So have conversations, people. Talk about the uncomfortable stuff. Until next time, my name is James. I'm from the internet and I am out. Peace.